jump in.
Okay, that's cool that you do this.
Hey, it's Debbie Potts, and I have my new friend Lenita that I saw at the Bay Club just lifting a ton of weight, so strong, and she's kicks butt in bike racing. And I thought I wanted to get to know this person more. And she ends up being in the industry and all over the place. So, Lenita, thanks for coming on the podcast today to share some information on how we can be like you as we get older.
That's hilarious, Debbie. Well, no, it was super funny. Thought the same thing about you when I saw you in the gym. So we kind of gravitate towards our type, don't we?
He's fit. Yeah, no, I know. So I wanted to start today just diving into what I think is so important to look at the energy systems and how we train and maybe adjust our training as we get older, as a lot of our listeners are 40, 50, 60 something years old and they're doing endurance sports. But I always find that, I would say don't blame the aging process, embrace it and adjust how you train, that you're not training the same way now as we did when we're 20, 30 years old. And then we'll get into more specifically the female athlete. Why we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results equals insanity and struggling.
So
So,
true, right?
yeah, what
Yeah.
do you think? What have
Oh
you
my gosh,
learned?
there's so much good information there, Debbie, and it's not, I don't think, widely disseminated yet amongst fitness professionals, and it's time, right? And I think as more of us approach this stage of life, well, I say approach for you, I'm well into it, but there's a lot that we can do, I think, to work with our changing physiology instead of fighting it because it's a reality. And for women, that reality, that shift is dramatic. For men, it's slightly different. Their hormones behave differently. It's like a
Yeah.
slow, gradual decline, but it's fairly linear for women. As you know, we get in our 40s and those hormones are just doing all kinds of crazy stuff all over the place. And most of us don't really have a clue. We don't even know
Yeah, totally.
the
We don't
myriad
have a
symptoms
clue.
how we experience, and we don't even know it's related to that chaos of our hormones starting to shift. And then eventually we do hit menopause and we basically get a flat line. And how does that change how we should be training, how we should be looking towards maintaining as best we can, that quality of life and as well as the longevity aspect. But, what does that mean and what can we do that is responsive to our physiology, accepting of it, yes, but working with it and shifting and adapting, and like you say, not continuing to the same thing that has always worked before, especially when we find it's no longer working. It's no longer working for us. And I think I see that a lot, unfortunately, in women of our demographic, especially when they come from an endurance sport background, right?
Mhm.
We're
Yeah.
really used to doing those long miles, lots of long, slow distance, and it's always worked. And we just watch what we've ate, and that's what we do. And the weight seems to do what we want it to. And then all of a sudden it doesn't.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I find, when I got my breakdown adrenal exhaustion 10 years ago, I was 42 and had no correlation to hormones. I just thought it was just, from too much stress in my life and exercise. But now I know so much more, but it's probably, perimenopause, it starts 10 years before you go to menopause. So it could be who knows what that overloads everything. But I think so many endurance athletes are burning the candle at both ends and they're training long distance and they're working full time. They have a family and they're just getting up at, 3, 4 in the morning to fit training in before they get the kids up to go to work. And
Yeah.
I just find it's people might not be getting the benefits they should. They might be causing more
Yeah.
harm than good sometimes the way they're training.
I think you are spot on. I really do. And I think, there's lots of things with hormonal impacts during that time where, estrogen just does so many things on our body, right? But one of the things that happens as our estrogen levels decline and we lose our estrogen receptors is we're just not as stress resilient as we were. Couple that with all the things you said, all the life stressors that are so typical at that stage of life, and it's just not a good scenario. Now, layer on top of that lots and lots of miles, another stressor on the body. And we think of it a positive one, but a lot of women get in the habit of day after day after day after day doing the same thing, right? And the body just can't quite adapt. And it's not, like I said, as resilient. And we start to get excessive fatigue. And I shouldn't fail to mention also just a lot of women of that age, they maybe want to lose a few pounds. So there's also caloric restriction another stressor
Mm-hmm.
that ends up backfiring because it's just all too much, for our physiology to handle. And so many pieces there, and we can kind of take them apart because if you think about them all, we can work smarter, not harder, and we can address them in a way that I think is more informed from a physiologic standpoint and counter a lot of that or anticipate what will happen and actually avoid it altogether, which would be the best case scenario.
Well,
Um,
that's what I think is the important part. Know what you need to do as you age for men and
yes.
women, but that we can, not have all these signs and symptoms that you hear about that are supposed to happen. Cause that's what I was talking about earlier this year. It's like, I don't need to have all that happen to me. Why don't I start supporting my adrenals and adjusting my training now and
Yeah.
lifting heavier weights instead of doing the chronic cardio and adjust my training schedule so I can optimize this phase in life
Yeah. Yeah.
transition.
And I mean, that is super ideal, right? Is to be able to be knowledgeable going into it, anticipate, and start to make those changes right around in our 40s. I'm well past that, but for you guys that are still there, it's never too late. I will add that. So if anyone's listening who missed that train, it's never too late. But the types of changes we're talking about are like you mentioned. So things that are working a little bit more with our physiology to create the outcomes that we want. For example, estrogen is a powerful anabolic hormone. It's our version of testosterone when it comes to muscle building, right? Women have testosterone too, obviously, but for us, the muscle building hormone is actually estrogen. So when those levels do decline, we have to lift heavier to get the same mechanical kind of stimulus to the muscle to get the adaptations we're after. And as a lot of you probably already know, once you hit 40 or so, the decline in lean mass that is typical is pretty pronounced. It's every year, it's another percent. And it accelerates even more beyond that at around 50 or so. Same thing with bone. We know that once we hit that menopause transition, there's a really steep decline in our bone mineral density. And that continues for about anywhere from 7 to 10 years, and then it kind of levels out. But if we're coming in at a point where our bone mass is not very high, and then we hit menopause and we get that steep decline, that's how we end up with osteopenia and osteoporosis. So strength training is going to be the best tool to counter the losses in bone mineral density and the loss in lean muscle mass that so frequently accompany that time of life. The problem is, I think, again, not to pick on us endurance athletes, but we don't typically prioritize the gym work. That's not where we've been spending most of our time. And when a lot of women are doing gym work, they're not really looking at doing it in a way that will allow them to gain lean mass, right? Or gain strength. They're kind of trying to work on muscular endurance. They're doing the 8 to 12 to 15 to who knows 20 reps, right? And then putting the weight down and going, yeah, probably could have done another 20. Okay, so we're not talking about that. We actually get like in the synaptic gap, where the neurons like transmit the impulse to the muscle fibers to
Mhm.
contract, there's like a decrease in the neurotransmitters around that menopausal transition in things like acetylcholine. So we need like a bigger stimulus even to get the muscle fibers to just go, yeah, this is and super interesting. I'm pulling in fragments here from a lot of Stacy Sims' work. So if any of you guys want to look into this more, she's the go-to source on this. But there are also changes within the muscle cell where the estrogen receptors lie, right? Where now we have a decrease in estrogen, we start to lose the effectiveness of the receptor cells, and that has to do with the strength of the muscular contraction on a microfibril level. So the actin myosin connection is not as strong. So what do? We overload the system with that mechanical stressor externally to a greater degree. We don't go with lighter weights. We go with those heavier weights. So we're looking at getting, at least maybe like 3 exercises in your routine. Doesn't have to be everything. Maybe 3 exercises where you're lifting a heavy enough load that you are reaching muscular fatigue / near failure by that 3 to 6 rep zone. I mean, if 3 sounds too scary, maybe 5, 6, but certainly trying to get, some of that
Mhm.
on a regular basis, let's say at least twice a week, is going to do a lot to counter that loss of lean mass, that loss of strength and power, loss of bone mineral density. which
Yeah.
that straight ahead sagittal plane running, our bodies just no longer respond from a bone mineral density standpoint to that as a stimulus. We think weight bearing exercise is great for bone, but bone likes multi-directional challenges and it likes sudden impact, and it doesn't really keep responding to that straight ahead walking or running the way we would like. So lifting is heavy is a really good way to go as well.
Yeah, it's funny, as I was telling you the other day, that watching my mom age, who's 81 now, but that's why I kind of, you learn a lot more how do you want to look when you're at your parents' age, or your future self is watching my mom and just looking at a picture of her a year ago at my birthday and how much she's changed over the year. Granted, she lost her husband, my dad passed away, so you just see this person's muscles in her thigh. I was with her last week. She put her whole hand around her thigh. And I can explain that it's still beneficial as you're older it's not too late, I think, doing
No,
that
you're
when you're
right.
80 and do
There's
something
some
about it.
research with women in nursing homes, women and men, actually, some of that research, and some of them are in their 90s. And to me, it's like a miracle the human body can actually still respond, get stronger, grow, muscle tissue at that age in life. And sure, it's not going to be like it was
Yeah.
decades prior to that, but absolutely it is still beneficial. But without that intervention, if you will, that's what you get, is exactly what you're seeing in your mom, which is that sarcopenia, where the muscles just pretty much disappear. And what you're looking at is a bone, a little bone with some skin around it, and that's kind of it. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of women, even much younger than your mom, where they've put themselves in a position where maybe they haven't been active up to this point in their life, and maybe they're even smaller in size because that's what has mattered to them, but their lean mass is so low that really the tissue that is around that bone is mostly fat tissue. So those women are at risk as well. They might look lean, they might look small, but it's having the actual muscle mass that is protective to both bone and metabolism. Muscle's metabolically active tissue, right? So the more active and fit and well trained our muscles are, the more glucose they're actually pulling out of our bloodstream. Because that's the other thing. You hit menopause and you just, even if you've been fine and you have no risk of diabetes, you do become more insulin resistant, right? However,
find that
trained skeletal muscle is going to be able to pull glucose out of the bloodstream when you're exercising without the assistance of insulin, to a higher degree than an untrained muscle, keeping blood sugars at a more consistent level, and avoiding some of that metabolic dysregulation that happens so typically at that stage of life.
I think as Dr. Gabrielle Lyons said, I heard an analogy of your suitcases. Get bigger suitcases, you can store more stuff in it. So same with your muscles. If you can build your muscles up, you can store more glycogen in there. So that's a good conversation. Is anything else on that insulin resistance, more carb intolerant, or you get carb more sensitive, more muscular, lean mass you gain as you age if you prioritize more strength training in your routine versus cardio? You think is more important because of that change in our hormones that we get?
There becomes a sort of a shift there where, if you're going to prioritize, and I'm not saying don't do endurance. I still ride my bike. I'll go on 4 or 5 hour rides. I love it, but I certainly don't do it every day. And we just have to incorporate not just the strength training, which goes a long way, but also the high intensity work, high intensity interval training. You don't need a whole boatload of it, but you need it in a big way. Because it also has a real benefit on our metabolic profile. It helps us to, again, maintain those type 2 fibers that tend to go first when it comes to muscle loss, which help us with things like strength and power, which as we age are muscle fibers we need, muscle types we need to be able to regain our balance and not fall, to be able to move quickly and not get injured, and just injury prevention in general.
Well, that's what I find aging. The power, strength, and speed is always what I find I really need to focus on. It's like I'm lacking power, I'm not getting the strength, and I do not have my speed to get up and go pace that I need.
And unless we intervene with training strategies that work on those things, they're not going to get better. And they're not going to even stay as, good as they are right now. And so I think from a trainer perspective, especially when working with women in midlife, but men as well, we have to intervene with more of that and a little less volume. All right, with the long, slow miles and the endurance training that we're just getting diminishing returns from. Your body knows how to do that, especially if you're an endurance athlete. You probably have a really good, aerobic energy system. It's probably pretty well trained. You probably have great cardiac output and stroke volume and, these types of adaptations that you've developed over the years. But what we know is that high intensity interval training can also give us a lot of those benefits and some that we don't get with the long, slow distance that our changing physiology can really benefit from at this stage of life. Yeah.
Now, I think of people, I just thought of people that say they're turning 60 and they thought, oh, I have more time. I'm going to train for triathlon or marathon or cycling events, whatever endurance event. And they used to race all the time in their 30s and 40s. And they just try to look back probably and train the way they did their
Right.
old self and try to expect the same results and just go, okay. I mean, people don't realize that the same training program, one size doesn't fit all, but just with the training program that really kicked did amazing when you're 30 isn't the same training schedule you should follow at 60 or 50.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's also interesting is when you look at doing maybe a more classic or traditional endurance type of training program for something like a triathlon, and look at how it worked for you then, trying it now, or trying a slightly different type of training program that really does prioritize strength training, that gets you that at least 2 times a week high intensity interval training and or sprint training in those modalities that you would use on a triathlon. I mean, doing it on a bike is a great way to go because it's non-weight bearing, it's no impact, so you can really get that high intensity. If you have a way to measure power, even better. But you can actually find that your performance can still be really good. I mean, like much better than you might expect. I don't know. It's been a fun journey for me, I think, just kind of being a guinea pig for myself, sort of experimenting on myself. And I race on the velodrome, as you know, track cycling. I come from a background of triathlon, but just kind of more slowly, more towards track cycling, which involves a lot of high intensity interval training. So it just kind of happened at a time in my life I was going through all this, meanwhile teaching spin classes that incorporate a lot of real structured interval training, and experiencing the difference it made in, I think, my ability to still perform at the level that I wanted to. And even allow me to do things like long endurance rides at a higher level of performance than I think I would have been able to had I not incorporated some of that strength training and interval training that I needed to for my track racing. So
why don't you throw in a little, you can brag here. Let's share what you've, what track cycling level you're at and what did you do the last few years? You've ranked pretty high in the world.
So I'm masters. So when I say all these things, remember that's qualified by being masters, not elite, because I am old. But yeah, no, it's been really fun. I've had a unique opportunity, I feel like, to get very involved in individual pursuit racing on the track, which is basically a time trial, right? It's 2 kilometers, and team pursuit, which is 4 women, 4 kilometers, and you're switching and going up track and dropping down and being, drafting those 3 girls in front of you and taking 1-lap pulls and just, it's, every bit of it just on the edge of survival, on that very edge. And it's been super fun. I've learned a ton. And yeah, kind of like I said, do an experiment. Like, it's addictive because you lay down a time and then you have a goal. You got to beat that time and then beat that time and beat that time. And just how far can I take this? So it's been kind of cool because since I entered it, let's see, probably 15 years ago, right around when I was 50, I haven't gotten slower yet, which is super fun.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
So I raced at Worlds this year and I got a gold in the 500, which was super fun. I'm not a 500 rider. I usually go longer, 2K. I don't think of myself as a 500 rider. That's under a minute. It's like around 40 seconds. So I don't think of myself, having come from an endurance history, as that being my event. But the reality is I haven't gotten slower in 15 years.
That's
I've had to
amazing.
work harder and work smarter and get better and all that. But doing the homework, it's coming out about the same. so,
Yeah.
so that's been
That,
fun. But I think of myself more as a 2K rider. I got silver in the 2K at Worlds this year, but then my favorite is the team pursuit. And we got gold, myself and my teammates, at the World Championships up in LA last October, which was
wow.
super duper fun.
You're
And,
amazing. Well, you're sure inspiration of, yeah, you
oh,
like
thank you.
walk the talk and you implement all these strategies that you've learned about as an exercise physiologist, but as, learning from Dr. Stacy Sims' research and putting it all into play and finding that it is, you're getting faster, not slower because, or staying the same even is
Yeah,
huge.
which is like, I
Kudos.
really like to encourage women, because what I kind of hear so much of, and I have a hard time listening to it, is, okay, would I be as fast? Or would I be, what can I say? Had I done all this in my 30s, would I have been faster then than I am now? I'm sure I would have, but that's not the point. The point is, life doesn't end just because you hit that menopause transition as an athlete, even. There's so much that we can still do. We just have to equip ourselves with knowledge and some good coaching and,
Mhm.
you know, good nutrition and good training principles. And I do think there's so much more that we can do. And it's not like I'm the only one figuring this out. I mean, oh my gosh, there's been some amazing women over the age of 50 that have done some amazing things in recent years in the world of cycling and endurance running and triathlon. So,
So going back to the strength part, what are, you're talking about the strength is so important part of your success as we talked about the 3 to 6 repetitions, but what are some key strength exercises people should
mhm,
start with, implement? Because I know you're doing leg press, you're doing the hack squat, the deadlifts.
yeah,
What
yeah.
are some key ones that you suggest people for athletes to get started with?
I really think it's important to, some of these more whole body compound movements, to make those be the ones that you choose to go heavy on with the lower reps, the 3 to 5 sets of that 3 to 6 rep range. So things like deadlifts with the hex bar or chop bar, I really think are a highly functional, really great move. For me on the bike, it's perfect because it's kind of the position and movement that I would use in a standing start on the track bike.
Ah,
But I
yeah.
think, yeah, so I really like it for that. But I like the trap bar because it keeps the weight more directly under your center of mass. So it decreases the shearing forces that could be problematic in the spine, right? If your form isn't just perfect, or if you've had a history of low back pain or something like that. So you want to add that caveat. You want a good coach and you want somebody else's eyes on you to make sure that you've got that movement, you're executing it well. But I think that's a great one. I think, yeah, I mean, I do leg press because I can't do I can't load a bar and put on my shoulders anymore to squat, just because I do have some arthritic changes in my lumbar spine. And that's just, that compressive force is not the best for me right now. But I find that the keeping that really nice hip flexion hinge movement in the deadlift actually is like a traction in my spine that makes it better, as well as making
Mm,
me
yeah.
stronger. So I love that. But yeah, like if a bench press, would be a good upper body one. Um, Also doing, moves like using a medicine ball, some of the slams and throws and, plyometric type movements are really
Mhm.
good. So jump squats and jumping lunges and all the variety of different plyometrics that we can incorporate also have like tremendous benefits on bone density, as well as that explosive power. And then
Yeah.
add to it all the metabolic benefits, right, that we can get as well. So these higher intensity movements, I think, are just so key. Um,
What do
See,
you
I just
find that people
started going the
doing
wrong
that
direction.
every day? Is I think a lot of people mess up with timing it and train
100%.
hard, recover harder, and
100%.
spreading those out. So it's
Yep. And I
a day
think that,
hard, then 2 days easy, or how
yeah, it's just
you
that
find it works.
concept of understanding that more doesn't equal better, because that's just how we think
That's
linearly.
my
More,
mantra.
better,
More is not
right?
better.
It's like, no, no,
Yeah.
quality and less is the way to go on these, on the high intensity intervals and on the strength training. Like, make your hard days butt kicking hard, and then the next day, recover, recover.
Yeah.
And we need that recovery more now than we did. And
Hmm.
it's, everybody's a little different. Like, you can experiment around a little. There is a case to be made for some people And I do find this can work for me for sequencing a couple hard days in a row,
Mhm.
maybe two, and then making that recovery day. That can work really well. I also find that I do best when I do my heavy lifting and my high intensity interval training within a certain window of about
Mm.
12 hours. I literally put them on the same day. And it's almost like the heavy lifting prior to the high intensity, it sort of triggers and primes that neural connection,
Mm.
and that it works really, really well. But I do think, everyone is sort of individual, and it also depends on your exercise history, of course, and your state of fitness going into it. So when I say lifting heavy, hopefully it goes without saying, but I should mention that that's not where you start day one, right? You need to
Yes.
build that foundation of just good movement patterns and a base of
Yeah.
endurance, strength endurance, right? Learning
Yeah,
the
that's for
movements,
sure.
learning to
Don't you
exercise.
always want to go correct people in the gym that are working out wrong? And the ladies that there's this lady I see every morning doing like 2 plates and doing 100
Yeah.
repetitions. Like, you're there every day. Can I just help you out a little bit? And
Yeah.
it's
It's
painful.
it's hard sometimes, right, to hold yourself back. I think I just have to, especially when you walk by that row of stair climbers and everybody's like leaned over, hunched
Oh,
over with their heads down on the stair climber, and you're just like, "Okay, I need to not look at these women that are on there all day, every day, and in that posture." I'm like,
yeah, I know.
"Just need to keep
Okay, so I do want to jump to the hit versus sit in zone 2 or whatever you want to call it. So we talked about the aging, Stacy Sims, and you talk all the time about the high intensity interval trainings versus short intensity training
Yeah,
versus endurance zone 2 training everyone's talking about, but we
yeah.
call it MAFFTone or max aerobic function heart rate. So what's
Yeah,
hit?
so, I mean, interval training's been around forever, right? But I would say
Yeah.
within the last decade or so, it has become a common phrase that pretty much everybody knows, that high intensity interval training. Um, but when you break it down, so sprint interval training would sort of be a subset of high interval training, is the way I look at it. And thinking of high intensity interval training as being, typically intervals of 1 to 3 to 4, maybe up to 5 minutes. So probably looking at VO2 max type work, zone 5 out of a 7 zone system. Um, and those are intervals where you're there's an element of pacing, right? If you're doing a 3-minute interval or a 4-minute interval, were you in class yesterday when we did those?
Well, see, that's what I was thinking of. Yesterday you did
They
8,
sort of suck,
6,
but you can't
5, and
go
then
out like a sprint, right? You have
yeah,
to go, you're
different
going
pace.
hard, but there's an element of pacing, right? You have to last that whole time. Um, that said, it's a high intensity. It's maybe what, 80% of max heart rate or more. Um, so we're not, sprinting in those cases, but that high intensity work is really valuable and a lot of benefits from it. And we know that it is more effective, for example, with postmenopausal women at addressing that central adiposity, that visceral fat that just is a classic part of that transition, right? We're going to get some of that. Body's going to preferentially kind of want to put it there. But there's been some research. I mean, I was reading a study, 2019 study, and this again is one that Stacy Sims mentions, but 40 women in that midlife transition, 20 of them doing endurance walking, and 20 of them doing only 20 minutes of sprint interval training, high intensity interval training. And they are the only ones that lost that visceral fat. So when it comes to body composition changes, that's probably number one that most women want at that stage of life, is they want to minimize that visceral fat, that
Yeah.
abdominal weight gain that just is part and parcel of the whole deal. And high intensity interval training is the way to go. That's what seems to create those results. And then the sprint interval training would be 30 seconds and less. So back to your question, kind of differentiating those two. Sprint
So
interval training. Now we're talking
sorry,
about
you said
true
hits
sprint.
1 to 4,
So yeah, one to
hit
four,
1 to
maybe
4,
up to
up to 5.
5 minutes or so. You could
Okay.
consider being those VO2 max efforts.
And then 20.
Yeah, and then the sprint interval training, truly 30 seconds and less, neuromuscular power, all out, everything you got, supra maximal, so above your VO2 max, right? And for these types of intervals, you have to go off perceived exertion or something measurable, objective like power, you cannot go off heart rate because heart rate is going to lag. It's anaerobic, right? Heart rate is more reflective of aerobic work. So obviously it's not going to respond until you're actually completing the interval.
Yeah.
It's 15, 20 seconds. So these are the type of interval that you want to probably get twice a week, but less is more. Less is more. You do not need a lot of these, so if you're doing, let's say, for example, 30 seconds on, a minute and a half off, 30 seconds on, whatever you need to kind of feel like you can recover enough to still hit that target. And again, the target's not heart rate. The target is something objective like power. Ideally, that's the one I love the most. I guess it could be pace if you're doing like hill running or something. What else could we look at? Those are, I think, some really objective measures to look at. Can I repeat that effort, that 30-second on, with the same quality for X number of repeats? Maybe you're getting 2 sets of 6. I mean, so your total work time in a scenario like that, it seems so small, right? It's like, okay, that's like 6 minutes of work. Done. Good. You got it. That's all it takes. Yeah. Which is super
Well, I think
awesome.
I was doing run intervals when, I don't know, I remember it was in Palm Desert. My mom's totally flat, and I was timing it. And then I realized when my pace started to get slower, not faster, that was time to be done and cool down. It was like, okay, I guess I
You
reached
got it.
my peak point.
Yeah,
That
no,
was
you
enough.
got it. That's exactly right. It's kind of like, okay, so my power has dropped. I can no longer do this interval at the goal target power that I was. I'm 10%. I kind of use 10% rule. Like if I drop by 10% one time, I give myself one more try, one more interval. Still can't, then I'm done. It's time to hang it up. Don't need more. More is not better. Less is more.
Yeah. I'm gonna get a big poster of that somewhere. I should put that back
But
there.
again, back to your other point, I think the reason that we often don't do that is because we have a hard time recovering and going easy on the alternate day. And if those easy days, we feel like we got to push, got to go hard, got to hit that gray zone, that kind of tempo zone that just feels like, okay, now I'm exercising, instead of this really easy zone, then it leaves us too fatigued to really be able to hit those intervals with the intensity that is the most beneficial that we want. So it's that hard, easy, that greater polarization of our training that really becomes the way to go.
Do you find it challenging for people to go hard? Like for me, I raced endurance distance for so long. So I'm great at going forever, but I'm not very good at going all out hard because I'm so used to saving myself and picking up at the end of a race. And that's, Ironman for so many years. So same in a marathon or 50K trail run I do is you just kind of feel like you have to save yourself. So how would you have people to get to go hard enough and not be scared of pushing yourself or know how to do it? I don't know, psychological or just don't
No,
know
that's a
how to get
great
those.
question. And I don't think you're alone in that regard at all. And I think it's two things. I think it's both physiological to some extent and psychological. So think of it this way. From a physiologic standpoint, your anaerobic capacity has not been stimulated to the degree perhaps that it could. And so some of the adaptations with that system that come with come with chronic training in those energy zones, it just hasn't necessarily happened for you because you haven't spent time there. And, down to the level of even those type 2 fibers, that some of them that can kind of go either way. They can kind of be trained more aerobically or anaerobic. So you're kind of recruiting more of those type 2. I get the A and the B confused sometimes. I think it's the type 2B that switch, but don't quote me. Anyway, but you spending time doing that anaerobic type of work is going to slowly transition those elements of your physiology more towards being capable at that level. So a lot of it is that, and a lot of it is also kind of, how do I explain this? It's like learning that here's what you thought was your top level. And it's that whole digging deeper and learning. And this is what I had to learn on the track because there's no other way. Like you think this is as hard as you can go. Here's your ceiling. And come to find out, and I'm not saying this is comfortable and everyone wants to go here, but there's actually this. And then there's actually this, and then there's actually this. There's this up here. And it's super fun if you love that kind of thing to sort of just explore that, right? And find out that it's that whole relationship with discomfort. So as an endurance athlete, you're very familiar with that. I know you are, but it's sort of a different aspect of it. It's the
Mhm.
intensity factor that you're trying to explore and get more comfortable with and push and reframe, as opposed to just the endurance aspect of it. And they feel different. And so I do think there's a psychological component there, of
Yeah.
learning to kind of accept. And I call it discomfort because I don't want people to think, oh, just go for pain. No, pain is something different. Pain is a red flag. Pain is, it's in a bendy place like a joint, all right? Or it's comes on with exercise and it's in your chest or your left arm or your jaw and it has to do with cardiovascular issues. So we're not talking pain. All right, those are bad things. But discomfort, we know what that is. It's in the belly of the muscle. It's burning legs. It's breathlessness beyond what you would like to feel in any circumstance. It's those kinds of discomforts that you kind of have to learn to accept in order to do some of this sprint work. But what's so cool is that goes along with this is a release of endorphins that is way beyond what you get with endurance training. There's a really weird sense of well-being that you can get after interval training, and I don't think I ever experienced that in the way that I do with a hard interval workout sometimes, or even a hard weight training workout than I did with endurance work. And I looked into the research and come to find out that is the case, that we get more of that
Yep.
endorphin release with high intensity interval training. So that's kind of cool. But again, we're all a little different in our likes and dislikes in that regard. And what I don't want to do is have people go to a place of discomfort that is so uncomfortable and unlikable to them that they shy away from.
Yeah, they
Right.
never come back again to your
Yeah,
class.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, I think that's why I feel like I need that group support to go hard because I don't push myself hard enough on my own. Like we did track or speed workout running this morning, and Neil can go hard and push himself, but I have to be chasing someone or being
You have to have a
chased.
reason.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like going to track work though happens to be Tuesday nights at San Diego Track Club. So I'm trying to get into doing that. But then
Mhm.
I don't know if it's good or bad. Your class is like 12 hours later. Maybe you said
Yeah.
that's helpful
Yeah, I
because
think,
that,
Debbie, honestly, it depends on how you feel. If you feel like your body's handling it okay, like I'm like you, I can do a couple back-to-back days and feel like I get a good amount out of it. And then I take that rest day and I actually feel great. So if it
Mhm.
works for you, I mean, I'd say
Yeah.
go ahead and
I
do
think
it.
then you do hard Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, then Thursday's total easy recovery
100%.
day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I would say.
But I
Um,
think people joining a group though, that's when it's beneficial
a
or
group can
like
help so
you
much. A group helps
have
a
a
lot. And for me, I love using a power meter on my bike and just being on the trainer. And I'll use apps like Trainer Road. I just need to see that little power target. And
huh.
I'm sort of, but not everybody is like me. Okay. So I don't need my little avatar on Zwift and all that. I just need a little graph that tells me what kind of power I need to create. And boom, that's what I need. I need that objective feedback.
Yeah, if
Uh,
you have a number you're trying to reach or beat, right?
yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
get the same or above.
Yeah, but the social aspect of a group is a great way to go. I think that's really key is learning what motivates you, and what helps you
Hmm.
get there because is something about the camaraderie and doing it with others that makes it a lot more fun. It's like
Yeah.
master swim or something, right? Like you
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
do
know.
those swim interval workouts on your
No,
own, probably.
not me.
I know
I'll
I
be out
wouldn't.
there like 20 minutes. I'm out. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
not good. It's a drill day today.
yeah. No,
So
it really helps.
what else? I was going to ask, so we talked about gaining power and strength and speed with this. And then there's the complicated part. You probably, you did Stacy Sims' menopause program and what people are fueling. Do I eat before, eat after? How do I improve recovery and repair? Do you have any thoughts on that for someone when you're
Yeah,
doing more glycogen depleting workout, breaking muscles down? Do you do
yeah.
more aminos? Do you time your food or what
I
have you
mean,
found for you?
so I do think it's super important to pay attention to that, and I think I was most surprised. I knew the whole low energy availability and red S is a thing, but I had no idea of how prevalent, especially the low energy availability, how prevalent that is, again, especially in women in sport. And
Mhm.
gosh, some of the figures were something like 80% amongst,
Wow.
I think it was cyclists, and it was like 100% amongst, I think it was dancers, ballet dancers or something, which, yeah, that makes sense kind of, right? Because we know there's a lot of disordered eating in that sport. But even with just, triathletes, endurance athletes, I think there certainly is a very common tendency to want to restrict intake. And when you couple that with high output in a lot of miles, it has a real negative return, right, on our physiology and on our metabolism. So I think the problem is eating too little in so many cases and not fueling our workouts.
Yeah.
So it is true that we become a little more, just carbohydrate sensitive or insulin resistant as we hit that menopausal transition, but we still need those carbohydrates in and around exercise. And that's the time when we want to make sure that we have them, right? So if we're doing those longer workouts, to fuel with that carbohydrate prior to, and then depending on how long it is during, is going to be really helpful for us in being able to continue to produce that steady work that we're trying to do with the quality that we'd want to do.
So it's kind of strategic carb timing and almost earning
Yeah,
your carbs. It's almost a reward. You get to eat
exactly.
your carbs. You
Exactly.
can't, other people can't
Yeah.
as
And I mean, I
much, but as
think
you're
the other thing
exercising.
that bears mention is just how protein synthesis drops off. So we definitely want to prioritize protein in a way that we didn't, perhaps. I know I certainly didn't when I was doing most of my triathlon days and endurance training. I know I didn't prioritize it, and somehow I still maintained my muscle, and that would not be the case now. So we need actually more protein than we did then as masters athletes. We really do. So the carbohydrate, I think just timing it around workouts, in and around workouts, is really smart and really strategic, making sure that we are not restricting it um, during those times, and then replenishing with adequate protein, um, and just fueling ourselves and looking at food as fuel, not as
Yeah.
the enemy. And, working in a fitness setting, I just have seen far too many women, sorry, gals, but we're the worst at this, about looking at food as the enemy for so many years. I mean, literally, maybe decades, right?
Yeah, for
So one
sure.
thing you will never hear me say in my class is that we're here to burn calories. It's like, no, we are here to get strong, to get fit, to take good care of our bodies, and then we're going to fuel our bodies with the good stuff that we need to create the adaptations that we're actually after. We're not going to withhold it and restrict and think our bodies can still somehow get stronger without adequate protein and adequate carbs that we need to fuel the work. So, kind of reframing, I think, what food
Hmm.
is a really good place to start for a lot of women.
Yeah, but I think it's eating real food though, nutrient dense whole foods. I think that's where people get confused. Like, oh, I'm supposed to do low carb, no carb. I'm like, no, you're supposed to eat real food and get rid of all the processed foods, and junk food is what I'm looking for. How can
Yes.
you get that nutrient dense food and prioritize your protein and spread that out evenly during the day
Yeah.
so you can
Yeah.
repair and recover and rebuild instead of break down, break down, break down.
No, exactly. I mean, you said it perfectly. It's getting the real food, getting the high density nutrients, and having it there when our body needs it, not having, whatever is quick and handy. So it does, which is probably not the healthier types of carbs that we're talking about. So planning kind of comes into this, doesn't it? And having on
Yeah,
hand those foods when you need them. If that is a change of habit for a lot of people, which I know it can be,
it is.
it does take a good chunk of time and mental energy until you get used to it, right? Until you start
Yeah.
coming up with strategies that work for you. But it's well worth doing, well worth taking that time.
Well, that's what most of my clients need more help with. They just want help, but they don't know what to eat. And I just keep posting my pictures of what I eat on my Instagram because, like, it's simple, you know.
Yeah. The
And I
simpler the
love Rob
better.
Wolf. Yeah, Rob Wolf has this great chart. It's called the Food Matrix, and has a column of here's your proteins, here's vegetables, here's healthy fats, and here's seasonings. Pick and choose whatever the combo, and there's a meal.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
just so simple like that. You don't have to make like a 5-course meal. I just had,
Right. Right.
fajita chicken meat or yeah, today with some guacamole and some good sour cream and salsa. And Neil made these amazing potato slices with seasoning. And I had it in a bowl. And I was like, that's amazing. And it took, well, he cooks, but, and I, I
Yeah.
do the dishes, but it was so easy to throw together. It
No,
just, I think people make it
absolutely.
complicated.
Yeah, if you can come up with a few things, and I'm no like chef of any any kind, but you kind of I gravitate towards those simpler foods. I like to know what I'm eating. I actually like to know what's in there. I don't want like 100 different ingredients. So simpler and the closer to the way that nature intended it to be is definitely my philosophy. I mean, smoothies are great. I love smoothies because you can throw in kind of like
Mhm.
tons of vegetables, and you can get your protein in there, and you can get your healthy types of nutrients that your body needs, and just gulp it down. So that's about as complex as I get, I guess. um
I've been doing that with my yogurt. I did a video today. I make
Greek
this
yogurt,
super
yes.
gut probiotic yogurt. No, I've been
Yeah.
making it.
Oh,
It's
you've been
super
making
gut
it.
yogurt. Yeah.
I
It's
used to do
coconut milk. For 48 hours, you ferment it with probiotics. So it's super high probiotics. Dr.
that's
William
awesome.
Davis wrote this book, Super Gut. Anyways, I've been making it. And then when I eat it, you're supposed to have half a cup serving a day. I put like everything in there because I'm like, oh, I need some protein, a little more protein. So I added a scoop of Paleo Valley whey protein with colostrum, then glutamine, and then some mushrooms and maca. Then I was like, I got to add some Laird's creamer on here because
You
now
just
it's like a
mix it
bunch of
all up,
powder.
right? And you got it in. So
It was just like a shake, but that's, easy to go stuff you can do. And I know when I go to that Natural Expo West, it's natural product show, I walk the show and investigate what are the quick and easy bars and shakes that are going to be good enough for athletes. And there's really nothing I find
yeah.
except for some bit long jerky and a couple of the bars. And like, I like the Laird's new bar. I have samples for you. And
I know, I
then
want to try
some
that.
other ones. But there's not a lot out there. So you do have to, make time on maybe Sunday nights to prepare and make some food. But I think that's a big part. Okay, one more question on recovery. How do you know you've recovered enough from workout? Like I use Aura Ring, I measure heart rate variability, track my
Yeah.
sleep, deep sleep. Do you do anything or suggest for people to figure out, okay, did I give enough time recovery before I go hard again?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of old school on that, in that I love our HRV. That's not old school, but I don't typically find most of my clients use that. Um, and I don't tend to remember to use it myself as often as I probably should. It's interesting though, because I think it can be a really useful tool. Definitely. It takes time to kind of know yourself and understand yourself, because as you know, it's not like one size fits all when it comes to HRV. You're looking at trends over time. I do think it's really useful, and Oura Ring's probably the best way to do that. There's actually a really cool app for that now too, that I forget the name of the scientist that invented it, but save that for another show. I'm experimenting with it, and it's really cool, and you can do it on your phone. So
Oh,
have you heard of that? Is
is
it
that
HRV?
HRV Elite? Or
No, I
there's
think it's
HRV Elite and there's a couple others
HRV
that
for
scans your
training, I
finger.
think it's called.
Yeah, HRV for training with your finger on the
Yeah,
phone. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, I do think there's great importance in listening to your body, and just kind of tracking in a log, whether that's on your phone and your notes, or just kind of noting your body's responses. How do I say this? So there's recovery within an interval, or within a workout, I should say, when you're doing an interval training program. And people are always looking for, how do I know when I should do the next interval? And typically what I find is they don't give themselves enough recovery between
Yeah,
intervals.
good topic. Mhm.
So that's one aspect, that kind of acute recovery within a workout. And then, of course, recovery within your week, and then recovery within perhaps a month
Yeah.
long cycle, where you're taking sort of a week that you're deloading a little bit. You're still working out, but you're lessening the load and the volume a little bit. You're keeping some sharpness and intensity, but decreasing the overall load. So different ways to look at recovery. And I do think that listening to your body is sort of an art that's learned over time, that we have sort of shied away from, by the increased reliance we have on some of these external metrics, which are useful. Don't get me wrong. I do love to look at all of that, but I really like clients to kind of note what their body is responding to, from having
Mhm.
looked at a log, and then having noted how they feel and how
Yeah.
their performance was on a given day. Because sometimes it's multifactorial. It might not just be their training program. Let's look at life, right? How did they fuel themselves? How did they sleep? How is their work life stress? So it's so many things, right, that you want to kind of get a handle on when you're looking at recovery like that. But that said, one real easy application, let's say you have a training program and you're going through your week and you get to day 3 and it's supposed to be XYZ on your training plan and you're just not feeling it. You're like, oof, I
Mhm.
don't know if this is a day for me on that. I'm just really kind of feeling lethargic. My energy is low. I feel like I've been, doing everything right, but for no apparent reason, my energy is just really low today. I always tell people to go ahead and, give it a try, like start out the program. But if you're 5-10 minutes into it and you're still not feeling it, you don't have to do that workout that day, right? You
That's
can
what I did yesterday. Did you notice? Well, you couldn't
just
see
like
me,
you did
but
yesterday.
I
Yeah,
was in class for, I
yeah,
was like 20 minutes and like, this sucks. I'm not
it's
getting
not working
anywhere.
for me.
My heart rate's 110. There's nothing more I can do. I'm not doing the workout. There's no point in me being here except for just to
Yeah,
spin. So I just spin, I think 30 minutes total, and then I left.
yeah. And I
And
think
then
the
I did a
starting point, but you
video
gave
on
it a
YouTube.
shot,
People can
right?
find. Yeah, I
Because
tried and I was like, it's not there.
it's not there. But there are those days, and I think we've all had them, when you feel like that and you go out and lo and behold, you get into it and you feel amazing, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to differentiate without at least like starting the workout and kind of seeing and then
Yeah.
listening to your body. And yeah, if it's like it's just not happening for you, then to do as you did and go, okay, today's not the day. For whatever reason, this isn't working for me today, and I'm going to modify this accordingly. I'm going to listen to my body. So I'm a big believer in that. I really am. I'm a big believer in, just fostering that connection with your body signs and signals to you and
Mhm.
understanding what they mean and learning how
Well,
to kind of test them. Yeah.
that's why I think it's funny is that, okay, how can you not like, I couldn't work out hard. It's like, how can you ignore the body saying I'm not moving? This is it. That
So
just
that
you
might be
can't push
your
through it.
history and your background. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that
I didn't know how to
you
push.
know what fatigue
Right.
actually feels like. And I think
Yeah.
that isn't as clear cut all the time for everyone.
That's true.
Because, you have a long day at work. Let's say your workout is planned for the evening and it's been a stressful, busy day. You can feel a
Mhm.
lot of fatigue that isn't actually physical fatigue, but it's confusing for some people. It's confusing to be able to differentiate. Oh, I don't want to go exercise. It just feels like too much.
Yeah.
But in fact, that's when you sometimes get into it and you do feel like, oh my gosh, I feel wonderful. And this is exactly what I needed. But I wouldn't have known that going in.
Well, I just
So,
feel like you need that transition. So if I'm going for a run, I used to always tell clients this too, just wait 15 minutes.
yeah.
And if you don't have it, go for a walk or turn around.
Yep.
And if you feel good, you usually are stuck and kind of feel stiff and your mind's maybe cloudy. And then you kind of get in the groove and maybe
Yeah.
endorphins kick in, you're good to go. But that is that 15-minute mark I find is always
I
kind of
agree
the
with you.
body's like, am I ready to go or ready to
At
turn
that
it
point, it's
around to
kind
the
of going to let
barn?
you know. And again, you think about that postmenopausal, the transition during that time, and there is a lot going on with a lot of women physiologically, where fatigue and that kind of just low energy, and also the whole how have you fooled the low energy availability, but those signs and symptoms can come on in a way that isn't always predictable, but it's real, you know,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
of that chaos that is going on with their hormones and the fluctuations that they're experiencing. And we have to
Yeah.
be okay with that. We have to be able to listen to that and adapt and do what we can, and what feels appropriate on a given day, regardless of what our program says sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it
true.
won't be the end of the world. It won't be the end of the world.
Well, that's a perfect spot to wrap up our call today. And I know we can have you back on the show because I know where you live and
Uh,
track you down. So if people
happy
have
to.
questions, where can they find you, Lenita? Do you have a
I'm
website
big
or
on social, but I
fan
have a
page?
what's that?
You have a fan page?
Um, I don't. I don't at this point, Debbie, but I'm gonna have one. I will working on these things. So, yeah, I'm gonna have Instagram and Facebook, and that's kind of it right now. So,
That's
um,
enough, I think.
that's
Just
enough.
one.
Yeah.
Less is more. More is not better.
Right. All
So.
right.
All right. Thank you so much for your talk today. It was great information. Hopefully everyone can apply it. Men and women should be able to get lots of information from this and how to maybe look at your training program and switch it up a little bit and try something new and not try doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Thanks, Debbie.